Solomon, the third king of Israel, is a central figure in biblical history, remembered both for his unparalleled wisdom and for his mistakes that culminated in devastating consequences for his kingdom. Son of King David and Bathsheba, Solomon was born in a complex and controversial context. The union of his parents began amidst a scandal. David, the most beloved king of Israel, had an adulterous relationship with Bathsheba, who at the time was married to Uriah, a loyal soldier of the Israelite army. To cover up his sin, David sent Uriah to the front lines, where he ultimately died. This action brought divine judgment, resulting in the death of the first child of David and Bathsheba. However, God, in his infinite mercy, gave the couple a new chance, and Solomon was born as a symbol of reconciliation between heaven and earth. From an early age, Solomon was raised to play a significant role. Although he was not David's firstborn, he was chosen to succeed him on the throne, a plan that was supported by the prophet Nathan. Nathan, recognizing Solomon's extraordinary potential, acted as his mentor, imparting wisdom and shaping his character. However, Solomon's ascension to the throne was not simple. Since David had other sons, power struggles were inevitable. Adonijah, one of Solomon's older brothers, attempted to declare himself king while David was still alive. To ensure the succession, Nathan and Bathsheba convinced David to proclaim Solomon as the legitimate heir. Thus, at only 15 years old, Solomon assumed the throne. Despite his youth, Solomon quickly demonstrated his leadership capabilities. To consolidate his power, he decisively eliminated internal threats. Adonijah, who had attempted to usurp the throne, was executed, and political allies who could pose a danger were neutralized. These actions, though ruthless, were necessary to ensure the stability of the kingdom. Additionally, Solomon adopted diplomatic strategies to strengthen his position, forming alliances with neighboring nations. He married the daughter of the Pharaoh of Egypt, a union that sealed a pact between Israel and one of the most powerful empires of the time. This was just the first of many political unions that marked Solomon's reign. The most significant moment in Solomon's life occurred in a dream when God appeared to him and offered the opportunity to ask for anything. Instead of riches, power, or longevity, Solomon asked for wisdom to govern justly. This request pleased God so much that he not only granted Solomon extraordinary wisdom, but also promised him incomparable wealth and honor. With this divine gift, Solomon became the wisest king of his time, and his fame spread throughout the ancient world. Solomon's wisdom manifested on various occasions, but the most emblematic episode was the judgment of two women who disputed the maternity of a baby. Both claimed to be the child's mother, and there were no witnesses to clarify the truth. Solomon then ordered that the baby be divided in half, with each woman receiving a half. This shocking proposal revealed the true mother, who preferred to give up the child to save her life. This judgment consolidated Solomon's reputation as a just and shrewd leader, attracting admiration from leaders and peoples of other nations. Under his rule, Israel experienced an unprecedented period of prosperity. Solomon expanded trade, established diplomatic relations with distant kingdoms, and transformed Jerusalem into a splendid city. His greatest achievement was the construction of the Temple of Jerusalem, a monumental project dedicated to the worship of God. This temple, built with precious materials and following divine instructions, became the spiritual center of Israel and a symbol of the covenant between God and his people. To carry out this work, Solomon formed a strategic alliance with Hiram, king of Tyre, who provided cedar wood and skilled artisans. The construction of the temple took 7 years and involved an immense number of workers, resulting in a work of unparalleled beauty and magnitude. But while Solomon led Israel into a golden age, he also began to tread a dangerous path. His harem, which eventually included 700 wives and 300 concubines, became a symbol of excess. Many of these women came from foreign nations and brought with them their pagan religious practices. Although Solomon was known for his initial devotion to God, he gradually succumbed to the influences of his wives, allowing the construction of altars for foreign gods such as Ashtoreth and Molech. These actions violated God's commandments and introduced idolatry into the heart of Israel, distancing the people from divine precepts. Solomon's disobedience did not go unnoticed by God. In a moment of great sorrow, God announced that the kingdom of Israel would be divided as a consequence of Solomon's sins. However, this division would only occur after his death, in respect of the covenant made with David. This divine warning marked the beginning of the spiritual and political decline of Israel, a nation that had once prospered under a king guided by God. In the last years of his life, Solomon dedicated himself to reflecting on his mistakes and choices. He wrote the book of Ecclesiastes, a deeply introspective text that addresses the futility of seeking meaning in wealth, pleasures, and worldly achievements. In his words, Solomon acknowledged that true satisfaction can only be found in God. He concluded the book with a powerful reminder: fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. Despite his flaws, Solomon's reign left a lasting impact. His wisdom and writings, such as Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs, continue to inspire generations. He is an example of how even the wisest can succumb to temptation, but also how repentance can lead to a reconnection with God. However, his death brought a period of instability to Israel. His son, Rehoboam, inherited a divided kingdom incapable of maintaining the unity achieved during his father's reign. Solomon's story is a reminder that even those blessed with extraordinary wisdom and power are vulnerable to the snares of pride and disobedience. His life serves as both a warning and an inspiration, highlighting the importance of placing God at the center of all decisions. Although he was a brilliant king, his final choices overshadowed part of his legacy, making his story a complex example of glory, fall, and redemption. Solomon, even as one of the wisest and most successful kings of Israel, could not escape the complexities of his own humanity. His reign brought wealth, prosperity, and fame, but also left a trail of spiritual and political consequences that profoundly impacted his people's history. While his wisdom was unquestionable, his inclination towards political alliances and personal indulgences revealed a more vulnerable side, full of mistakes that shaped his legacy. After consolidating his power and establishing peace in the kingdom, Solomon embarked on an ambitious project that would become the hallmark of his administration: the construction of the Temple of Jerusalem. This temple was not just a physical building, but a symbol of Israel's covenant with God. It represented the divine presence among the people and a sacred place where sacrifices would be made and prayers offered. The construction of the temple was a monumental feat. Solomon utilized the best available resources, including cedar from Lebanon, pure gold, and precious stones. King Hiram of Tyre played a crucial role in this endeavor, providing materials and skilled craftsmen. The temple took 7 years to complete, and its inauguration was marked by a grand celebration during which Solomon dedicated the construction to God with a powerful prayer. The temple's glory attracted the attention of various nations, further consolidating Israel's position as a prosperous and influential kingdom. However, Solomon did not limit himself to building the temple. He also erected a palace for himself, an even grander structure that took 13 years to complete. This contrast in the time and resources invested between the temple and the palace raised questions among some of his subjects, who began to notice the king's priorities gradually shifting. While the construction projects reinforced Solomon's power and prestige, his marital alliances began to bring complications. Each marriage represented a political pact, and his harem, which included 700 wives and 300 concubines, became a mix of cultures and foreign religions. These women, coming from nations like Moab, Ammon, Edom, and Egypt, brought with them their religious traditions, many of which involved the worship of pagan gods. To please them and maintain his political alliances, Solomon allowed altars to be built for these gods in Israel, something that directly contradicted God's commandments. This mix of cultures and religions weakened Israel's monotheistic faith. Altars dedicated to foreign deities began to proliferate, and the people, influenced by these practices, turned away from the worship of the God of their ancestors. Idolatry not only challenged divine sovereignty, but also created spiritual divisions within the kingdom. God, who had granted Solomon wisdom and prosperity, was deeply disappointed with the king's choices. In an act of mercy and justice, he warned Solomon of the consequences of his disobedience, declaring that after his death, the kingdom would be divided. This prophecy was a devastating blow. Solomon, who had once ruled a unified and prosperous kingdom, saw signs of fragmentation beginning to emerge even during his lifetime. One of his servants, Jeroboam, was approached by the prophet Ahijah, who revealed that God was preparing him to lead 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel. This revelation not only signaled the future division of the kingdom, but also highlighted how Solomon's actions were eroding the spiritual and political foundations of his administration. In addition to internal tensions, Solomon faced external threats. Neighboring kingdoms, perceiving his spiritual weakness, began to test Israel's limits. Enemies who had once been subdued during the kingdom's years of glory now found opportunities to challenge Solomon's authority. The combination of external and internal pressures made the end of his reign more turbulent than the years of prosperity that preceded it. Despite his mistakes, Solomon continued to be a reflective figure. In the last years of his life, he dedicated himself to writing about his experiences and the lessons he had learned. Among his most well-known writings are the Book of Proverbs, which offers practical and spiritual advice, and the Book of Ecclesiastes, a profound meditation on the transience of life and the search for true purpose. In Ecclesiastes, Solomon reflects on the futility of seeking happiness in wealth, power, and earthly pleasures. He concludes that everything is vanity and that the only thing that truly matters is to fear God and keep his commandments. Although Solomon's repentance was sincere, the consequences of his choices were already in motion. His death marked the beginning of an era of division and instability for Israel. Rehoboam, his son and successor, inherited a kingdom that already showed signs of fragmentation. As God had prophesied, the kingdom was divided. The 10 northern tribes became the kingdom of Israel, led by Jeroboam, while the 2 southern tribes formed the kingdom of Judah, governed by Rehoboam. This division weakened Israel and made it vulnerable to external attacks, initiating a period of decline that contrasted sharply with Solomon's years of glory. Beyond biblical narratives, Solomon's figure is also surrounded by legends and apocryphal traditions. One of the most intriguing stories is that of Solomon's ring, a supposedly magical object that granted him power over demons. According to these traditions, the ring was given to Solomon by the archangel Michael and allowed him to command spirits to perform tasks, including the construction of the Temple of Jerusalem. Although these stories are not included in the Bible, they reflect the fascination Solomon held over later generations, solidifying his image as a leader endowed with supernatural abilities. Solomon's legacy is a paradox. On one hand, he is remembered as one of Israel's greatest kings, whose wisdom and achievements left an indelible mark on history. On the other hand, his failures and spiritual deviations serve as a warning about the dangers of pride and disobedience. His life is a powerful reminder that even those who receive extraordinary gifts from God are accountable for their choices and must remain faithful to divine principles. Solomon's story continues to inspire, challenge, and teach valuable lessons about leadership, spirituality, and human nature. His writings, achievements, and mistakes are studied and debated to this day, demonstrating that a king's journey can offer profound reflections on what it means to be human and to seek God amidst life's complexities. Solomon's story, despite his greatness and complexity, carries profound lessons about obedience, humility, and the consequences of our spiritual choices. While Solomon's reign began as a divine promise of prosperity and wisdom, it ended as a warning to all who place human ambitions above faithfulness to God. His legacy is not just a narrative of material and intellectual achievements, but also a reminder of how deviating from God's paths can bring devastating consequences, even for the wisest. Solomon ruled Israel during a period of unprecedented stability. He inherited from his father, King David, a strong and well-established kingdom. However, he did not limit himself to continuing David's deeds. He expanded Israel's borders, transforming it into a center of trade and culture that attracted admiration from neighboring nations. Under his leadership, Israel prospered economically, with caravans bringing wealth from distant lands and treasures accumulating in Jerusalem. This golden era seemed to fulfill God's covenant with David, consolidating Israel as a leading nation in the ancient world. One of the most remarkable aspects of Solomon's reign was his relentless pursuit of knowledge and wisdom. He not only received the divine gift of discernment, but also cultivated a curious mind, seeking to learn about various aspects of life. Solomon wrote thousands of proverbs, songs, and treatises on topics such as justice, morality, nature, and human relationships. His texts, preserved in the Bible, continue to be a source of guidance and spiritual inspiration. Proverbs, for example, offers practical advice on how to live wisely and piously, while Ecclesiastes reflects on the deepest questions of existence, such as mortality and the meaning of life. But alongside his wisdom, Solomon cultivated a lifestyle that reflected his wealth and power. His court was a reflection of his grandeur, with luxurious feasts, gold and silver ornaments, and a vast collection of precious goods. He possessed majestic palaces, including the famous Palace of the Cedar Forest, known for its impressive architecture and luxurious building materials. His wealth not only demonstrated his prominent position among the kings of the time, but also represented a significant contrast with the living standards of his people. This disparity began to generate murmurs of discontent among the Israelites. Although Solomon was a visionary ruler, his ambitions came at high costs. He imposed heavy taxes and forced labor on the people to finance his grand works, including the temple, his palace, and other infrastructure projects. While these achievements consolidated Israel as a kingdom of great prestige, the burden on the population created tensions that would be felt more deeply after his death. However, the turning point in Solomon's reign was his spiritual downfall. Despite being chosen by God to lead Israel and having received divine wisdom, he allowed his political alliances and marriages to steer him away from God's precepts. Solomon's love for foreign women became a weakness that compromised his devotion to the God of Israel. Influenced by his wives, he allowed altars to be erected for pagan gods and participated in practices that violated Mosaic law. The foreign gods worshipped by these women included Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Molech, associated with human sacrifices, and Chemosh, the god of the Moabites. These cults were abominable in God's eyes, and their presence in Israel marked a departure from the monotheism that had defined the people's relationship with God since the times of Abraham. Solomon, who had built the Temple of Jerusalem as a symbol of the covenant between God and Israel, now allowed the very heart of his kingdom to be tainted by idolatry. This disobedience elicited a direct response from God. In an act of just judgment, God revealed to Solomon that the kingdom would be divided as a consequence of his infidelity. This decision, however, was tempered with mercy. God declared that the division would occur only after Solomon's death, in respect of the covenant made with David. This declaration was a mixture of grace and warning, highlighting both God's faithfulness and the seriousness of Solomon's sin. During the final years of his reign, Solomon lived under the weight of this prophecy. He began to face resistance both from within and outside the kingdom. Jeroboam, one of his officials, was identified by a prophet as the future leader of the northern tribes. Meanwhile, external adversaries, such as Hadad the Edomite and Rezon of Damascus, began to challenge Israel's authority. These conflicts undermined the stability Solomon had worked so hard to build, paving the way for the eventual fragmentation of the kingdom. Despite his downfall, Solomon sought redemption in his final years. His writings in Ecclesiastes reflect a restless soul searching for meaning amidst the futility of human ambitions. He concludes that the only thing that truly matters is to fear God and obey his commandments. This final introspection offers a glimpse into Solomon's repentance and his desire to return to God's path. Solomon's death marked the end of an era of unparalleled splendor in Israel. His son, Rehoboam, ascended to the throne, but his inexperience and arrogance hastened the kingdom's division. The northern tribes rebelled, forming the kingdom of Israel under Jeroboam's leadership, while Rehoboam remained with the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, forming the kingdom of Judah. This division weakened the nation, making it vulnerable to external attacks and initiating a period of decline that starkly contrasted with Solomon's years of glory. In addition to his historical significance, the figure of Solomon also gained prominence in legends and apocryphal traditions. Among these stories, the most notable is that of Solomon's ring, a magical object that, according to tradition, granted him power over demons. With this ring, Solomon is said to have commanded spirits to help him in the construction of the Temple of Jerusalem and in other tasks. These narratives, although not biblically based, reinforce the mystique surrounding his figure, presenting him as someone who transcended human limits with supernatural abilities. However, these stories also highlight the contrast between Solomon's potential and his flaws. He had all the necessary gifts to be the greatest king of Israel: divine wisdom, unparalleled wealth, and a special relationship with God. But his choices revealed human fragility, showing how even the most blessed can succumb to temptations. Solomon is, therefore, a paradoxical figure. He was a builder, both literally and figuratively, who elevated Israel to unprecedented heights. But he was also a destroyer, whose choices corroded the spiritual and political foundations of his kingdom. His story is a testament to the consequences of disobedience, but also to God's grace, which remains available to those who repent. His legacy continues to echo through his writings, his achievements, and the lessons of his life. He reminds us that no matter how wise or powerful we are, true fulfillment can only be found in God. His story is an invitation to reflection, a challenge to obedience, and a source of hope, showing that even in downfall, there is an opportunity for redemption. The life of Solomon offers a complex narrative full of ups and downs, revealing not only the glory of a king blessed by God, but also the dangers of spiritual deviation. The impact of his actions reverberated through generations, shaping the history of Israel and providing timeless lessons on leadership, wisdom, and faithfulness to God. However, his story does not end solely with the achievements and mistakes recorded in the Bible. Solomon is also a figure surrounded by legends and symbolism that highlight his transcendent influence, even centuries after his death. One of Solomon's most remarkable achievements was his ability to unify and expand Israel. He transformed the nation into a center of trade and culture, establishing trade routes that connected Israel to distant nations. Solomon possessed a naval fleet that conducted commercial expeditions, bringing gold, silver, ivory, and other exotic treasures. This economic prosperity allowed him to amass unparalleled wealth, including the famous ivory throne adorned with pure gold, symbolizing the peak of his glory and power. But the kingdom's wealth and luxury were not enough to maintain spiritual and political unity. The growth of Israel brought with it new challenges, primarily the need to balance the people's religious identity with external cultural influences. Although Solomon had begun his reign with a strong devotion to God, political pressures and personal compromises led him to make spiritual concessions with disastrous consequences. He not only allowed, but actively encouraged the construction of altars for foreign gods, violating the principles that upheld Israel's covenant with God. The idolatry introduced by Solomon did not only affect his own relationship with God, it had a profound impact on the people of Israel. Over time, devotion to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was weakened, and pagan practices spread among the tribes. This spiritual decay eroded the foundation of national unity, creating divisions that would be exploited by external enemies and ambitious insiders. One of the most symbolic moments of Solomon's spiritual decline was the construction of altars for gods like Ashtoreth, Milcom, and Molech. These gods were associated with practices considered abominable by God, including human sacrifices and fertility rituals. The presence of these cults in Israel represented a break with the monotheistic values that had defined the unique relationship between Israel and God. For a king who began his journey with a prayer for divine wisdom, this deviation was particularly tragic. Meanwhile, internal tensions began to rise. The people of Israel, burdened by heavy taxes and forced labor, began to question Solomon's leadership. These dissatisfactions were aggravated by the cultural divisions introduced by the king's foreign wives, whose influences further undermined Israel's collective identity. The people's patience was wearing thin, and the kingdom's stability began to falter. In the last years of his life, Solomon faced the reality of his choices. He realized that despite all his wisdom and wealth, his pursuit of earthly pleasures had been in vain. This introspection is clearly reflected in the book of Ecclesiastes, where he declares, "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." In this deeply philosophical text, Solomon explores the futility of seeking meaning in wealth, power, and earthly achievements, concluding that the true purpose of life lies in fearing God and keeping His commandments. Although Ecclesiastes is often read as a pessimistic work, it also contains a message of hope and redemption. Solomon, even while acknowledging his mistakes, points to God's faithfulness as the only anchor in a world full of uncertainties. This message resonates as a plea for all generations to seek God above all, valuing what is eternal over what is fleeting. After Solomon's death, the kingdom he had ruled with such glory began to fragment. Rehoboam, his son and successor, inherited a throne that was already shaken by internal divisions and the people's dissatisfaction. His inability to lead wisely further exacerbated the situation. When the northern tribes demanded relief from heavy taxes and forced labor, Rehoboam responded harshly, ignoring the advice of his elders. This led to the rebellion of the northern tribes, who separated to form the Kingdom of Israel under Jeroboam's leadership. Meanwhile, Rehoboam remained governing the Kingdom of Judah in the south. This division marked the beginning of a period of instability that starkly contrasted with the years of unity and prosperity under David and Solomon. The two kingdoms frequently entered into conflict, and both faced external threats from foreign powers. Solomon's disobedience had sown the seeds of this fragmentation, demonstrating how spiritual choices can have lasting political and social consequences. Despite these failures, Solomon's legacy remains significant. His writings, including Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs, continue to inspire millions of people around the world. They offer not only practical advice for daily life, but also profound reflections on the relationship between man and God. Proverbs emphasizes the importance of wisdom, while the Song of Songs celebrates the beauty of pure love. Ecclesiastes, in turn, challenges readers to reflect on the meaning of life and seek what truly matters. Furthermore, Solomon is often remembered for his contribution to the cultural and architectural development of Israel. The Temple of Jerusalem, though destroyed centuries later, remained a symbol of God's presence among his people and a landmark in the history of architecture and religion. Even in ruins, it continues to be a site of great spiritual and historical significance for Jews, Christians, and other religions around the world. Solomon's figure also transcended the boundaries of the Bible, entering popular imagination through legends and apocryphal traditions. Stories like that of Solomon's ring, which supposedly granted him power over demons and spirits, reflect the fascination he held over later generations. These narratives, though not canonical, contribute to the mystique surrounding his figure, presenting him as someone endowed with supernatural abilities who played a crucial role in humanity's spiritual history. However, these narratives also highlight an important contrast: Solomon's unparalleled potential and his human vulnerability. He was a king chosen by God, gifted with extraordinary talents, yet he still succumbed to the temptations of power, pride, and complacency. His story is a powerful reminder that no human being is above the need to obey God. Solomon is, therefore, a paradoxical figure. He embodies both the best and the worst of humanity, the pinnacle of divine wisdom and the depth of human error. His life is a testament to the blessings and challenges of holding a position of great power and responsibility. He teaches us that true leadership requires not only intelligence and skill, but also humility and faithfulness to God. In the end, Solomon's story points to God's grace, which is always available, even to those who err. Although he failed in many aspects, his final reflections show a heart still seeking God. His legacy is an invitation to introspection, a call to obedience, and an inspiration to seek divine wisdom and presence in all areas of life. Solomon's legacy is a narrative rich in contrasts. He was the wisest and most prosperous king in Israel's history, but also the one whose choices led the kingdom to fragmentation. His life is a profound study of God's blessings, human temptations, and the consequences of neglecting divine commandments. Even in his mistakes, Solomon left an impact that transcended his time, influencing cultures, religions, and traditions far beyond the borders of Israel. After Solomon's death, God's prophecy was fulfilled accurately. The kingdom of Israel, which had reached its peak of power and influence under his reign, was divided into two distinct nations: the kingdom of Israel in the north, with its 10 tribes, and the kingdom of Judah in the south, composed of the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. This division was a landmark in the history of the Hebrew people, introducing a period of political instability, internal conflicts, and vulnerability to external enemies. Rehoboam, Solomon's son, assumed the throne of Judah, but his lack of wisdom and ability to handle popular discontent accelerated the kingdom's fragmentation. The kingdom of Israel under Jeroboam quickly adopted practices that further distanced it from God's commandments. Altars and shrines were established in places that competed with the Temple of Jerusalem, introducing idolatrous cults that became a predominant feature of the new nation. Meanwhile, the kingdom of Judah struggled to maintain its spiritual and political identity, facing its own challenges, including foreign influences and internal corruption. These events reflect how Solomon's mistakes reverberated through subsequent generations. His decision to allow idolatry and prioritize political alliances over obedience to God weakened the spiritual foundations of Israel. The people, once united by faith in one God, were now divided not only politically, but also religiously. This spiritual division was perhaps the most painful of all, as it compromised God's purpose for Israel as a chosen nation. Despite his failures, Solomon left a literary and spiritual legacy that continued to inspire and guide subsequent generations. His writings, such as Proverbs, the Song of Songs, and Ecclesiastes, encapsulate divine wisdom and the reflections of a man who experienced both the highs and lows of life. These texts offer a unique perspective on the relationship between God and humanity, addressing themes such as justice, love, mortality, and purpose. Proverbs, for example, is a collection of practical advice and spiritual principles aimed at helping readers live a just and wise life. It emphasizes the importance of fearing the Lord as the foundation of wisdom, warning against the dangers of pride, laziness, and disobedience. These lessons remain relevant today, guiding both individuals and communities in their pursuit of a meaningful life. The Song of Songs, on the other hand, is a poetic celebration of human love and intimacy, often interpreted as a metaphor for the relationship between God and his people. This book demonstrates a more personal and emotional side of Solomon, highlighting his appreciation for beauty and the connection between people. It serves as a reminder that spiritual life also includes valuing relationships and the earthly blessings bestowed by God. Ecclesiastes, perhaps Solomon's most introspective work, offers a profound reflection on the transience of life and the search for true meaning. Written in the final years of his life, this book reveals a man who, after conquering everything the world had to offer, realized the futility of seeking satisfaction in material things. His words, "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity," resonate as a warning against the obsession with wealth and earthly pleasures. In the end, Solomon concludes that the only thing that truly matters is to fear God and keep his commandments. In addition to his spiritual influence, Solomon is remembered for his cultural and architectural contributions. The Temple of Jerusalem, though destroyed centuries later, remained a symbol of God's presence among his people and a landmark in the history of architecture and religion. Even today, the temple's ruins continue to be a site of great spiritual significance for Jews, Christians, and other religions. Solomon's figure also transcended the boundaries of the Bible, entering the realm of legends and apocryphal traditions. Stories like that of Solomon's ring, which supposedly granted him power over demons and spirits, reflect the fascination he held over later generations. These narratives, though not canonical, contribute to the mystique surrounding his figure, presenting him as someone endowed with supernatural abilities who played a crucial role in humanity's spiritual history. These legends also highlight an important paradox. Solomon was a man endowed with extraordinary gifts, but his humanity led him to make significant mistakes. He reminds us that regardless of our blessings or abilities, we are all vulnerable to life's temptations and challenges. His story is a testament to the power of free will and the consequences of our choices, both for ourselves and those around us. Solomon's impact on the history of Israel and the biblical narrative is undeniable. He was one of the most influential kings of his time, bringing prosperity and international recognition to his kingdom. However, his life also serves as a reminder that power and wealth, no matter how great, are not substitutes for obedience to God. His story continues to be studied and debated, offering valuable lessons on leadership, spirituality, and the balance between ambition and humility. Reflecting on Solomon's life challenges us to consider our own priorities and choices. His story encourages us to seek God's wisdom in all areas of our lives, reminding us that true success is not measured by material achievements, but by the depth of our relationship with the Creator. Just as Solomon discovered in the final years of his life, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom and the path to true peace and purpose. Although his death marked the beginning of a period of instability for Israel, Solomon's impact never completely disappeared. His writings and achievements continue to inspire and instruct, while his failures serve as a reminder of the consequences of neglecting faith and obedience. He is ultimately a figure that encapsulates the complexity of the human condition, simultaneously blessed and flawed, wise and vulnerable, grandiose and imperfect. Solomon's story is an invitation to reflect on what truly matters in life. It challenges us to seek God above all, valuing His promises and commandments as the true foundation of a meaningful life. Regardless of our failures or mistakes, God's grace remains available, offering us the opportunity for redemption and renewal. As Solomon wrote in his final days, "Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind." In the end, Solomon's life is both a warning and an inspiration. It shows us that even the most blessed can fall, but also that repentance is always possible. His story invites us to learn from his mistakes, seek divine wisdom, and keep God at the center of our lives. Thus, we can find true meaning and purpose, not in our earthly achievements, but in faithfulness to the divine plan.